Hi, I'm Jewel Alderson with the San Diego County Office of Education. Today, I have a quick overview of real-world deliverables and public product. This is based on a presentation I did for San Diego Unified for their Project-Based Learning Institute. So for those of you who might have missed that, or anyone else who's interested in this topic, let's dive in and talk about a few things around how products mirror the deliverables found in the workplace, and how we can help students demonstrate, apply, or exhibit their work for an authentic audience who has a meaningful connection to the project. As we dive in, I just want to start by getting you to think about what is your favorite public display of work. This might be a museum or gallery. It could be a space where you have different kinds of shows, musical shows, orchestra. There are a ton of ways that we see people's final product out in public. So one of the things that has been really fun for me is recently one of my industry partners I work a lot with is Comic-Con, and they've opened the Comic-Con Museum. And in my work with them, as they look to curate new work, they kind of introduced me to this topic around skimmers, swimmers, and divers, and how people interact with a museum exhibit. You have your skimmers who kind of just wander through, read the stuff in big text, and may not spend a ton of time in an exhibit. You have the swimmers who are going to read the big text, and anytime it catches their eye, they might stop and read a little bit more about it. And then you have the divers who will literally read every single word in that exhibit. So as we think about how people interact with the work our students create, I think that's also a great concepts to be curious about is, are people skimmers, swimmers, and divers? And as they walk by the exhibition of work your students are creating, how can they interact with it at different levels? How can you draw people in so that they want more? And so thinking about it not just as an opportunity for students to dump their information in the public eye, but rather for students to really curate and create environments that draw people in, that get people really active, that get folks to be hands-on. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the product your students will create authentic and meaningful. In order for something to be authentic and meaningful, it needs to mirror products that are created by people in real careers. Now, I'm going to stop right here because I have this soapbox and I will stand on the corner and talk about it all day long, and that is poster boards. We see a ton of projects in the field of education where we put information on a poster board and stick it on a wall, and really all you're doing is replicating kind of what a textbook does. And so you're not really having students apply their learning and build industry skills unless it's in one of two fields. So think right now for a second, what are a couple of fields where a poster is an authentic product? Give you a second. That's right. You probably came up with marketing, right? So anyone who's in graphic design, marketing, they're going to make posters as part of a broader marketing campaign. A poster would be part of that. Anytime there's a new film released or some kind of like a band is coming out and going to have a show, whatever these different things are, of course, posters are a piece of that marketing campaign and could easily be something that your students create in their suite of marketing tools. The other place that we see posters are in scientific research, where once you have publishable research, you create a poster that basically takes what a research paper is and puts it onto the wall, and you stand in front of it and you answer questions about the research. And so there's usually graphics, some data, and some of your general overview of the experiment you did. Otherwise, what you really want to do is push yourself to create something as different, authentic, and meaningful that aligns with something that folks in industry might create themselves. As you're thinking about that, here's a couple of other categories you might think about when you're looking at what products your students will create in the course of their project. Does it impact the community? That's a great way to make it authentic, give it meaning, and give students real ownership of the work that they're doing. Does it force them to apply their content knowledge? We might go off on a tangent sometimes when it comes into project-based learning, where a student gets a topic that might be related to our learning objectives, but not as directly aligned with it as it needs to be. And so you do want to think about those products and deliverables and how they align to the content knowledge and other objectives that you have for your course. It should also build competency in technical and or essential skills or soft skills. How are we building our student skills through the course of creating this product or deliverable? And finally, having something that connects to the student experience is incredibly important. It does help drive the project, give them ownership of it, and create an authenticity that doesn't just apply to the world beyond, but also to themselves and their lives. When we think about a public product, right, this is something that's out in open view and regular people get to see it. And we'll talk about our audience in a little bit. But here, it's not just a tangible item. It could be that physical product. It could be a presentation, a demonstration of skills, right? You could, I mean, what an amazing public product to have, you know, kids out in the quad changing the tires on a car, lickety split, with safety in mind, and maybe even as a demonstration to help other students know what to do if that ever happened to them on the side of the road. Could be like a report. One of the things I used to like to do, which is like kind of a smaller product along the way, is I used to teach chemistry, medical chemistry primarily, but at one point, instead of started doing the pre-lab assignments, which is just this boring teacher speak for read the lab and answer some questions about it, I would give out a grant application. And so the students would have to go home, understand what they needed to do for the lab, and then follow an RFA to apply for a grant. And in that, they had to explain their experiment, talk about the materials needed, and things like that. And then they would be awarded that grant in the shape of all the materials they needed to do the lab. Excuse me, apologies for that. All right, so there could be a performance, it could be a combination of the above. And here's actually just kind of a quick list with different categories. When we talk, you can have an exhibition, you could do portfolio pieces, help your students in design, have them do writing and reflections, performances. You can do simulations and scenarios. One group that I've worked a lot with, they do this thing every year called the zombie apocalypse. And what it really is just an emergency response project, but they partner with local law enforcement and emergency services to set up like an emergency response. And so different students have different roles in guiding other students at the school through this emergency response because the zombies have attacked. We need to see, you know, what the impact of that is on the campus. But in doing that, it actually simulates a real life emergency response scenario. You might also see things that are specific around community impact, audio visual. I was working with a instructor recently in automotive, and he wanted to really challenge the students around what do you pick at the pump, right? You drive up to that pump, which button do you push? Why do you push a certain button? What does it mean to have different kinds of fuel? And so although originally he might have thought to do something in the classroom or something like a poster board, we got to thinking, and if you've ever been to the gas pump and you saw like one of those video players that just starts yelling news at you, I said, what if there was a video player that could help you pick your gas pump, which gas to pick? And so now he's really excited about having students create gas pump ads, and they may be able to partner with a local gas station, have a QR code there where you can scan it and view the videos so that you too can pick the right fuel for your vehicle and make those informed decisions. And finally, some authentic deliverables may also include certifications, allowing students to have something they can bring with them for employment one day. And so this Jamboard link that will be linked in on the video down below is an opportunity for you and other teachers to share some of their products that they're planning for project-based learning. And so you can see here is a whole host of different products that some of the teachers have outlined that were interesting to them, that they're excited to work on, that they're creating with their students right now. So you might want to peruse this Jamboard and feel free to add your products as well. All right, so this is a place where if we were all together, we'd play tag. And I like to incorporate these feedback mechanisms within presentations so that you can think about how you use these with your students. Playing tag is a great way to get specific actionable feedback for something. So something like tag, you can give this to your students. There's some great sentence starters here. And when someone shares something about their project or their product, then their peers can go through and say something they liked, ask a question, and give a positive suggestion using these sentence starters. So this is a great way for you to help your students interact with each other's work. So let's go ahead and talk a bit about authentic audience. Once a student creates work of value for an authentic audience beyond the classroom, work that is sophisticated, accurate, important, and beautiful, that student is never the same. When you have done quality work, deeper work, you know you are always capable of doing more. And when it comes down to a lot of the studies that have happened in education, the biggest impact on students' success and students' ability to gain learning from year to year is if a teacher believes they can do rigorous work. And so believe in your students, believe they can do rigorous work, and give them a rigorous audience so that they are engaged and they desire to do rigorous work themselves. And so let's talk about this audience. The more authentic the audience, the higher the student engagement and the higher quality work you will usually get from your students. Okay, your students are not doing their work for the rubric. Although the rubric is going to help guide their work, the rubric is not an authentic audience. So let's look at different audiences. Okay, basic right here, present to a teacher to fulfill a requirement. Very basic, very boring. That's what most of education is, unfortunately. So let's try to get out of that kind of low level authentic audience. All right, bring in the parents and the school community. Now we're starting to gain audience. It's people who are engaged. This could be out on the quad with all of the students that are there. It could be a parent night where you invite the parents in. But unless a parent is actually in the industry that you're teaching students to be part of, their feedback is not going to have authenticity and add to your students' experience and help push them to be better at what they're doing. So to do that, you kind of get up here to a public audience beyond the school, or to people capable of critiquing. And that's really important, is if that student is changing the tire, like I talked about earlier, can you have someone from the mechanic down the street come and watch and give feedback around, oh, there's an efficiency missed here. Oh, you need to tighten that bolt more tightly there. And so when you have someone who's capable of critiquing and giving actual feedback because they know the ins and outs of what your students are learning, that is when you really push your students to excel, to have rigor. It also is somebody who can call them on it if they're wrong. As a teacher with project-based learning, one of the things you have to learn to do is let go of being the owner of information and instead allow your students to become experts. However, it is nice to bring in those other experts who can verify your students' information and make sure that they're kept to a high standard for the information that they're putting out there. And so ultimately also, it's not just about whether their information is important, but whether it has an impact. And so some of the best levels of audiences are audiences who benefit from that information themselves. So this could be something like if you're in a health pathway and you have a community service kind of a movement where you're trying to inform the community about something, maybe you go and get a booth at your local farmers market and have students pass out their brochures and inform the community about whatever it is that they are studying in such a way that may improve the lives of those around them. And so as you see, as we go up this hierarchy of audience, we have an increase of motivation and engagement and real opportunities for students to excel. Because what happens when students launch their work to that audience? They grow more empathetic. In a world where it's all about me and I'm going to be on TikTok and I'm going to be on social and it's all about all these things and what people like about me, putting a focus on our community allows them to grow that empathy and grow those connections that they need to be successful one day. Having more and more opportunities for them to get feedback allow them to realize that it's a growth mechanism and it's a positive thing, because in education, most of the time you get feedback once, and if you get a C, you get a C, and man, doesn't that suck, but that's where I'm at. So if instead we give them opportunities to get feedback and grow and pour themselves back into it, they find that constructive criticism is something that they want and that they embrace instead of something they're afraid of because at the end of the project they just get a bad grade because that's the only time they get graded. This means that they can start to become fearless or at least have a little bit more confidence when they get in front of others. They work harder. We want our students to develop a growth mindset and connect the learning to their world, and ultimately find their creative voice, find their ability to impact the world they're in, and also to engage in that iteration where they're always trying to do better year after year, day after day. So authentic audiences have meaningful connections to the project and are capable of providing constructive feedback to students. The more authentic the audience, the more authentic the work is that you'll get from your students. Now, where do you find them? Start with your students. Give your students opportunities to come up with who the audience should be for the project that they're working on. If you looked at design thinking frameworks, it always starts out with empathy. Know your audience, find your audience, understand who they are. And so while you're doing that kind of work, you can even have your students suggest who should be invited, how they can bring this to that audience. One thing to note though is like, don't go out of your way the first year you're doing a big project to have the most amazing audience, because it can be a real struggle. And I really would encourage you to take a step at a time as you grow and go through your own iterations on project-based learning. So if you haven't found an authentic audience before, think about a time that the parking lot is full at your school. This could be a sporting event, right? Every football game, basketball game, those parking lots are full and the campus is full of off-campus people. This could be a theater presentation, parent night, some other community event that's happening on your campus. Anytime students are coming, or not students, anytime the public is coming to your campus is an opportunity for your students to showcase work. So consider ways to create a display of your art or even your process. So if you're doing videos, maybe you did storyboarding. Wouldn't it be cool if your students presented their storyboards at a football game and then eventually at later in the year, they were able to have their own short films screened, there in the theater or something of that nature. So you can find those natural audiences there on your campus or even in the community. So like libraries are a natural place where the community meets. And they could have opportunities for your students to showcase their work or provide something like, if you're creating children's books, maybe you do the reading hour at the library and your students are the ones who are leading the work there for the public. So when you're selecting an audience, you really want to think about these three things. How can you allow the students to decide on the best audience for their work? How can you allow the project to guide or dictate an audience? And how can you as a teacher determine the audience? And what I say is that none of these should be the sole determiner of the audience. And students have a great opportunity to be really thoughtful about their work and who it's for. And so helping them contribute, and maybe students bring some folks in. But if you just depend on the students for your audience, man, that's a lot of risk, right? They're maybe cold calling or sending out notes, but there's no guarantee they'll get someone there. As a teacher, sometimes we determine it because it's easy. All right, we're just going to do it at lunch. We're going to have the booths and it's done. But that doesn't necessarily hit the level of authenticity. And so having opportunities to have your students involved is helpful. And at the end of the day, the project does also dictate the direction your audience should go. And so be thoughtful about how your project dictates the audience. And you can think about pros and cons of each, but I think all three of these components are important as you're selecting an audience for your project. There's a number of examples that you can think about when it comes to authentic audiences. I think the number one is, as we started out today, it was like, what is a product people in that industry would make? So what if your audience are the people who actually do make that product in industry, right? So take a step back, think about that product, both from a creator side, the people who make that product, and then also from the side of those who would use that product most likely or for whom it is benefiting. Here are some additional potential audiences for products where you're creating projects and you want authentic learning. A lot of times people wait and invite all of these folks in at the very end to have like a panel and all the students present their work. That's great, but what happens to the feedback from, somebody who comes in on a final panel? If you don't have a revision period, then that feedback just kind of goes in that round uh, recycle bin on the way out the door. So consider bringing in your authentic audience around the midpoint to look at the draft and give students feedback to guide their work in a better place, and then have them back at the end to celebrate the work that's been done and make suggestions for the future. If we want students to use their voice, we have to show them someone is listening. So consider that. Think about how you can ensure the right person is listening, because at the end of the day, we know you're listening, but we've got to take the pressure off of you as the teacher and increase the pressure on the student for someone who is listening that is an authentic audience. And finally, here's another piece, is the exhibition itself. How do you get students to plan, coordinate, and market the exhibition, showcase, or public display? Here we have a short video that's going to help you think about what comes to mind when it comes to exhibitions. And in order to do this, let me optimize. Let's go ahead and play.
One of the things that I think makes exhibition very important for students is to have an audience that goes beyond just their parents and family members. To be able to invite businesses, other schools and organizations, and even to contact other places around the world. Whether it's their parent or their grandparent or someone who has come in from the community to celebrate that piece of work, or someone who they designed the work for. That human connection between the creator of the work and the person who is receiving the work or the message of the work is the most beautiful part of exhibition. Students and teachers should exhibit not just a beautiful project, but also document the process of the project. Share about the meaning of the project and why the students are doing it.
I think the exhibition is one of the most authentic ways I've seen to assess a student's learning. Students find value and they find discipline in the project when they're a part of something that needs to get done. And so a well-designed project and a well-designed exhibition requires something from every student in the class.
I think a lot of planning is important when the students do it, because then at the end of the day, the exhibition is really theirs. It's not just what the teacher planned out for them.
I think that it's an equity of voice issue within the classroom to ask students what they think and ask them for advice. But I also think it just makes the work more real and more accepted by the students as you ask them to do really difficult things.
Curating student work along the school hallways and the classrooms and in every little nook and cranny has a dramatic impact in school culture, because the students know what the school is about and they take pride seeing their work in public view, especially when you have guests touring the school and you see their work. The students can get really confident that their work is up there being exhibited. It also shows that we do care and value what they do. It doesn't just go in the trash can when it's done, but we give it a life and it goes beyond the classroom and we put it up and it's shown with all these audience and viewers.
Right, so when you're thinking about your exhibition, it's how do you bring it to life for your students? And then also just thinking about it can be a very heavy lift. And so how do you encourage your students to be part of the design of your exhibition, to bring in their own audience along with the audience that you're bringing in, and to really own the products that they create themselves. Here's another model for peer feedback that is really helpful. We're obviously not pairing and sharing here in a one-directional video, but really thinking about elevate, suggest, inquire, and reflect are helpful. But here's a question. How can you involve students in planning for the final exhibition, presentation, or showcase? And what are the benefits, right? A lot of the essential skills or soft skills in a project can really strongly align with the putting on of the exhibition itself, to making those arrangements, having them create the setup of how their work will be exhibited is a huge component of them having ownership of that exhibition itself. Now, we have a whole new future ready project-based learning framework at the San Diego County Office of Education. And this slide, if you're in there, there's a link to it. It should be below in the YouTube area. You can click on any of these and it actually gives you additional resources around these different areas of project-based learning. And so today I just want to thank you for joining me. Before we leave, I think I also want to encourage you to continue to explore this Jamboard. If you look on the second page, it actually is an opportunity to think about the audience you might incorporate for your project itself. And you can see here are some audiences that we're seeing in our some of the projects with those folks I worked. And finally, where will they exhibit the work? A lot of them could be at your showcase, in a community garden. You can see through various forms throughout. And so as you're planning, thinking about where they will exhibit and how that can be more authentic. So thank you so much for joining me today. And there are additional resources here if you'd like it. I hope that you enjoyed the session and let me know if you have any questions. Good luck as you work on powering up your PBL.